Kelly, let's move along to the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a team the last few years, whether they were in the Super Bowl versus the Rams or they were falling flat on their face and riddled with injuries, I have been unable to figure out. Currently 20-1 to win the Super Bowl, plus 950 to win the AFC, plus 230 to win the division, and their season win total is 9.5. Riddle me that, Batman. What are we going to do with this Bengals team?
Yeah, so Baltimore 11.5, Cincinnati 9.5. The markets are saying there's a pretty big difference between these two teams. And of course, last year the Bengals were lined as a 10.5 win team. They finished 9-8. The year before they were lined as an 11.5 win team, and they finished 9-8. Of course, they had the magical season in 22 where everything went right for them. They ended up going to the Super Bowl that year with Joe Burrow. But since then, under, if you've been betting Bengals season wins. Last year, top 10 yards per play on offense, 5.8 yards per play. And notice, we talked about Baltimore. They were 6.8, and they were number one. Since he's top 10, a full yard per play lower. And of course, Baltimore last year, we talked about what a tough schedule they faced. Based on my powering numbers, since he has the other end of that, they had a very easy schedule last year and still underachieved with that schedule. Now, Zach Taylor, back for his 7th year. The head coach, he calls his own plays on the offense. New defense coordinator Al Golden coming in from Notre Dame. He coached under Marcus Freeman last year as the Irish made a run to the national title game. Lou Anarumo was bye-bye after some concerns a year ago with the state of that defense. The biggest issue, or the biggest offseason storyline right now is Trey Hendrickson, the star pass rusher. He's holding out. We're looking for a new contract, and his status matters a lot for a defense that really doesn't have a good replacement. This is a Bengals team. They paid their guys. Burrow's been paid. Chase, Jamar Chase been paid. T. Higgins have all been paid. And now they got to pay Hendrickson. So when you talk about that many stars and you have to pay them that much money, what do you have? Salary cap issues. What happens when you have salary cap issues? You have depth concerns. You're unable to fill some of the holes that you might have. And then you have to worry about injuries a whole lot more. And this roster for Cincinnati, let's just call it top heavy in that regard. Now, they did bring in a couple of defensive tackles, B.J. Hill, T.J. Slayton, Mike Gesicki at tight end, a nice signing for them. And Gesicki essentially said that he took less money so he could play with Burrow, which is probably a positive sign. So, you re-sign Higgins, you re-sign Chase, you re-sign Hill, Gesicki. It's not like this is a team that, Slayton, the defensive tackle, was perhaps the big free agent signing. Mostly it was bringing their own guys back. When it comes to roster holes, going into the draft, the guard, defensive end, linebacker, positions of need. And what happens? Top 3 picks. Edge, edge rusher, linebacker, offensive guard. So I thought in terms of drafting for need, they did a decent job in that regard. We'll see how Shamir Stewart ends up for Cincy. And we look at the schedule again. AFC North face AFC East and NFC North teams. The 3 extra games for Cincinnati, we're talking about Jacksonville, Denver, and Arizona. 3 teams, all 3 of them, I think are, they all might be pretty good. 2 of the 3 might be really good. Cincy's had a problem with slow starts. Look at this. 2024, 0-2 to open the season. 2023, 0-2 to open the season. 2022, 0-2 to open the season. 2021, they finished 1-1 that year. 2020, 0-2 to open the season. 0-2 in 2019 with just Zach Taylor. But the Burrow/Zach Taylor era has seen them go 1-9 straight up over the first 2 weeks of the season. They got Cleveland and Jacksonville the first 2 weeks this year. If they go 0-2 again, it's a problem because the rest of the schedule gets much tougher. At Minnesota, at Denver, at Detroit, at Green Bay, Pittsburgh over the next 5 weeks. And down the stretch, Miami, Arizona, Cleveland, chance for a strong finish after Baltimore, Buffalo, and Baltimore the previous 3 weeks. Cincy does not have it easy schedule-wise this year. I think their schedule is a good bit tougher than it was a year ago. And Kelly, before we let go of the Bengals, we were talking off air about which is the better bet. Right now, there's line variance with Cincinnati. All right, you can find 10 on the Bengals for their win total. You can find 9.5, the under, plus 130. You can also find Cincy right now at no to make the playoffs, plus 130. Which is the better bet? Under 9.5 wins or no to make the playoffs at the same price, plus 130 either way. So I went back and did a little bit of research. 2022, at least one 9-win team made the playoffs, but not all the 9-win teams made the playoffs. 2023, same story. At least one 9-win team made the playoffs, but not all of them. Last year, one 10-win team didn't make it. All the 9-win teams didn't make the playoffs. So here's 9.5 plus 130 versus no to make the playoffs plus 130. What do you think the better bet is there?
I'm looking at the schedule here. Our friends over at the Westgate have every single line out for every single game right now. Mm-hmm. And yes, those things do change, but I do like it as a reference point to start the season. I know that your season win report, you guys talk about all of this stuff a lot more in depth. But as I see it right now, there are 7 games, as Ralph Michaels likes to say, within the threes. So whether they're less than a field goal favorite or less than a field goal underdog, that's a lot of coin flips for a team that as I said, don't have the greatest read on and haven't for the last few years. And this is a team that has just burned people alive in Survivor. So even as, 6-point favorites, they've lost games outright. They're only a touchdown favorite in 2 games here. This team scares the crap out of me. Mathematically, I wish I had the answer for you in terms of 9.5 and make the playoffs. But right now, point blank, no to make the playoffs. Plus 130 sounds like the better bet to me. As you mentioned, there have been 10-win teams that haven't made the playoffs. I don't see either of these things actually happening. I think they could win 9 games and not make the playoffs. Maybe split it up and bet a little bit on both.
And that's just it. Sometimes you spend all this time debating between 2 good choices and they end up both being right. And if I'll just put it this way, I'm debating as to which of the 2 is better for the clients, and I'm not very bullish on Cincy. Cincy is on the short list for a team I'm looking to fade in 2025. We'll talk about Pittsburgh in a minute, but we are going in alphabetical order. Oh, Kelly,
I'm so sorry.
And there's a team between Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. That would be the Cleveland Browns.
I apologize.
That's the way the graphics are set up and all of that. And of course, Cleveland, is as low as 4.5 at some. I see 4.5 with the over minus 160, for example, at DK. Westgate's 5.5 even money on the Cleveland Browns. So there is legitimate variance for the Browns in the betting marketplace. And again, you're not likely to see a whole lot of that come August and September. The market's going to decide if they like 4.5 or 5.5 is the better number for Cleveland. Last year, Cleveland was lined as an 8.5 win team, and they finished 3-14. The year before, they were lined as a 9.5 win team and went 11-6. In 2022, a 9.5 win team was the line. They were 7-10, and in 21, they were 10.5, lined at 10.5 wins. They finished 8-9. So that's 3 losing seasons in the last 4 years, with that outlier 11-6 season in between in 2023, the year that they had 5 different starting QBs, and Joe Flacco was the guy who led them into the postseason. Last year, they finished with minus 22 turnovers, which explains a lot of the 3-14 record. That was the worst in the NFL by a fairly wide margin. The offense, nothing short of an unmitigated disaster. 4.6 yards per play full season. That was number 31 out of 32 NFL teams. They couldn't move the football, and they couldn't stop turning it over. And that, my friends, is a recipe for a losing season. Now, based on my powering numbers, the Browns played the single toughest schedule in the NFL last year. And it really wasn't that close. The average point spread of their opponent was more than 2 points higher per game than the team that played the lowest. So they really had a tougher schedule-wise. And of course, Kevin Stefanski's 5 years on the job here. He's a sharp guy. I don't blame him. Tommy Rees, the new offense coordinator, Jim Schwartz back as the DC. And of course, a 3-14 team is not supposed to have salary cap issues. Cleveland has a ton of salary cap issues because of the Deshaun Watson contract, and that's going to haunt them not just this year, next year as well. That puts Stefanski on the hot seat. GM Andrew Berry's on the hot seat, and there's not much hope for either guy because Cleveland is not going to be a winning team this year, even in a best case scenario. Or it'd be difficult for Cleveland to be a winning team in a best case scenario. So when you have those type of deals, coach on the hot seat, GM on the hot seat, miserable season last year, and the roster really isn't good enough, and the schedule is brutal this year, those aren't positive signs by any stretch of the imagination. Now, you got Kenny Pickett at QB. You got Joe Flacco back at QB. You have Shedeur Sanders. And, oh, yeah, the guy who they drafted to actually be the quarterback, Dylan Gabriel. And then you still have Deshaun Watson sit down IR. This franchise had 40 different quarterbacks, starters, since their reboot in 1999. And this year, we could see another year where there are 3, 4, 5 guys start a game for Cleveland. Again, they've got 4 QBs right now, all of whom think they're live in this quarterback chase. And who gets the job, who knows? And in addition, you have, because of the salary cap issues, you lose guys like Dalvin Tomlinson, Juan Thornhill, James Hudson, key core players. Thornhill's great safety. Tomlinson, we like him on the DL, Hudson on the offensive line. This is a problem when you're losing quality veterans and you just don't have money for them and your roster is loaded with holes. Now, they did re-sign Myles Garrett. Again, Garrett requested a trade, and he's like, yes. And Cleveland's like, all right, we're going to pay you. And then they paid him. So you got your star, but what at the cost of what other holes? You got Garrett, you got Kenny Pickett, and then what? Cornelius Lucas, the offensive tackle, not a lot of other additions for Cleveland. And of course, they traded out of the number 2 spot. They didn't get Travis Hunter. I don't blame them for that. They have enough holes that they need more than one play now guy. I thought it was a right move for Cleveland to make. But Mason Graham, Carson Schlesinger, both on the defensive side of the football with their top 2 picks, and then a running back and a tight end and a quarterback with their next 3. I don't know. I'm not really. Let me talk about the schedule for Cleveland real quick. Yeah, because this is not a team that looks good. This is not a team that feels well run right now, and it's a team with a bunch of holes. In addition, again, AFC North teams faced AFC East and NFC North teams. Cleveland has a bottom 5 rest disadvantage. All right, so opposing teams have more rest than they do. They're going to have multiple weeks where their opponent has extra days to rest and they don't. 0 night games, 0 Thursday games, no Monday night, no Sunday night. The league is absolutely burying this team. Their national TV games in London against Minnesota at 6:30 a.m. here in Vegas time. That's their only national TV spot. In addition, schedule-wise, there's 4 teams on the schedule line below 500. Tennessee, the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Raiders. I happen to think 3 of those teams might be bet on, which means even their weakest opponents are on the up. And look how they start. Cincy, Baltimore, Green Bay, Detroit, Minnesota. That's no easy start. That's an 0-5 right out of the gate, unless they can knock off the Bengals, which maybe they can. But certainly Cleveland, they look like one of the worst teams in the league. They're lined as the worst team in the league. And you're going to see, every year there's going to be a 2-win or a 3-win team or a 1-win team, and Cleveland certainly has that feel to it.
Last year, I bet the Baltimore Ravens to win the Super Bowl, and well, I got my heart broken once again by playoff Lamar. Let's break down this team and what we expect to see from them here in 2025. Currently, this team is pretty much 7-1 to win the Super Bowl. Thought that was a little cheap. To win the AFC plus 350, to win the division minus 145. And as you talked about on last week's show, those teams over double-digit wins are hard to get. 11.5 wins over minus 115.
So we got to stop with the playoff Lamar narrative. Remember, Mark Andrews dropped the play. It wasn't Lamar.
I don't remember that, Teddy.
It was Mark Andrews with the ball in his hand going, oh, I don't feel like going to the Super Bowl this year. And then Lamar gets the blame. All right. Lamar had another MVP caliber season last year, period. Plain and simple. He's as good a quarterback as you'll find in the league, including Patrick Mahomes, including Josh Allen. He's certainly a guy we're going to talk about at the same level with those guys. Whoever else you want to put on that list, Stafford, yada, yada. But The Ravens last year lined as an 11-win team. They finished 12-5. In 23, they were lined as a 9.5-win team. They went 13-4. 10 wins in 22, pushed right on the number. So they've been a double-digit win team each of the last 3 years. We look at what they did last year. Look, +6 in turnovers. It wasn't like they had crazy turnover margin. What did they do last year? Really impressive statistical profile. Number 1 in the NFL, yards per play in offense. By a wide margin, 6.8 yards per play for Baltimore last year. The best offense in the league. That's Lamar Jackson. Defense? Oh, they were top 5 in defense yards per play as well, giving up just 5.2 yards per play. And they did it, again, we talk about strength of schedule. I use my powering numbers on the week the game was played. I don't look at the end of the season and go, oh, this team had a what and what record, and add them all up. I use my powering numbers that week so we know, did they face Team A when they were good or when they were bad? So based on my powering numbers, they had a much tougher than average schedule last year. One of the 5 toughest in the league. So they dominated statistically. It wasn't all turnovers, both offense and defense. And they faced a much tougher than average schedule. So Baltimore was really, really good last year. They just didn't win it all. We have John Harbaugh back as the head coach for his, 18th year on the job. Todd Monken back as the offense coordinator. Zach Orr back as the defense coordinator. So there's continuity in Baltimore. And again, this wasn't a team that had a bunch of salary cap money to spend. It wasn't a team that had a bunch of needs to fill necessarily. It was more about re-signing their key guys in free agency. And of course, they kept Ronnie Stanley on the offensive line. You say, what they do in the offseason? Well, they re-signed their key guy at left tackle. Other than that, free agency-wise, it really wasn't a whole lot going. DeAndre Hopkins, he looked washed up last year. Cooper Rush is a backup quarterback. I mean, there's not a lot that they were able to do when it comes to making big, splashy pickup moves. But given that the team that was already there was as dominant as any team in the league, I don't think they needed to. I'm not all that worried. They have, in theory, some holes on defense, cornerback, inside linebacker, safety, edge rushers. But look what they did in the draft, a safety, an edge rusher, a linebacker. 3 of their first 4 picks were filling legitimate holes. Worth noting, Justin Tucker's gone for Baltimore. And he's been, the best kicker in the league for the last 13 years. And he wasn't last year. But the ability of Tucker to hit a 60-yarder, to hit every key field goal, you wonder if that's going to be one of those issues that maybe comes back to haunt a team that's been haunted a lot in the postseason last year, whether it's Mark Andrews dropping a pass or playoff Lamar, whatever you want to call it. Justin Tucker's departure is something of a concern for this better. When it comes to the 2025 schedule for Baltimore, AFC North teams face AFC East and NFC North. The 3 extra games for Baltimore: Kansas City, Houston, and the Rams. And all of them were first place teams last year. And frankly, based on my early numbers, all 3 of them a little bit weaker than they were a year ago. Now they have a tough early slate. Buffalo, Detroit, Kansas City, Houston, the Rams, all the 6 weeks before the first 6 weeks before the bye. But down the stretch, Cleveland, the Jets, Cincy, Pittsburgh, Cincy, you got the Patriots, the Packers, the Steelers. Only Cincy and Green Bay amongst that group are lined above 500 this season. So while it's tough early, wouldn't be surprised if Baltimore doesn't get off to as good a start as they have in some recent seasons. They have a good chance to make up some ground down the stretch and perhaps have some momentum going into the playoffs. Baltimore looks, once again, like a legit contender in the AFC.
Let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like I mentioned for Marco D'Angelo, sorry about that. I was going down the Super Bowl odds and not the way of alphabetical order. Let's hear about the Steelers. I mean, like I said just a minute ago, Teddy, this is a team that always does less with more. I'm a big Aaron Rodgers fan, but the Achilles tear is no joke. I'm not sure that someone who's my age can really fully rebound 100% from that. What are you hearing out of Pittsburgh in terms of him being the starter? What are you thinking he's going to be able to do? And then also there's a pair of K-State quarterbacks on the roster as well. Do you think Will Howard is going to make the roster?
So Pittsburgh lined 8.5 wins, juice to the under. You can find 8.5 over plus 110 right now, and that's exactly where they've been lined. They were lined at 8.5 wins last year. They were lined at 8.5 wins the year before in 23. They were lined at 7.5 in 2022 and took a bunch of over money. They were lined at 8.5 in 2021. So they've been right in this range the last few years. And of course, they've gone over the total every year. 10-7 last year, 10-7 the year before, 9-8 the year before, 9-7-1 the year before that, going over by a hook. 12-4 in 2020, went over 9.5 that year. So it's been 5 straight overs for Steeler season win backers. And again, it's not like they have to have a remarkable season this year. They go 9-8. You'll cash an over bet on Pittsburgh again in 2025. Now, how'd they get to 9-8? Well, they were plus 16 in turnovers last year. Only the Bills were better for Buffalo. So certainly that was a big factor in the equation, the ability to avoid turning the ball over and creating them on defense. Now, the offense only gained 5.1 yards per play, bottom quartile. Based on my power rating numbers, they had a much tougher than average schedule in the NFL. One of the 5 toughest in the league. Interesting that we have the 2 longest tenured head coaches in the NFL, both in the same division, Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh. Obviously, Tomlin now is 19th year with the Steelers. Arthur Smith as the offensive quarterback for his 2nd season. Cheryl Austin back for his 4th season as DC. So we talk about Aaron Rodgers and what he has left. You know, Rodgers last year, he put up decent stats. If you watched him play, he was not an elite quarterback a year ago. Now, he's in a year further out from that Achilles injury that he suffered in 2023. In theory, you know, they have weapons for him. The DK Metcalf trade certainly stands out in that regard. And we've seen the Steelers invest a ton of draft capital on the offensive line in recent years. You know, 4 of their 5 starters are recent draft choices, 2 first-round tackles, and Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu. You know, so in theory, this offensive line is supposed to be loaded, and Rodgers is supposed to be better than he was a year ago. And of course, if Rodgers get hurt, they still have Mason Rudolph, who led them to the playoffs in 2023 after Kenny Pickett had his share of troubles. Last year, 5 straight losses to close out the season. The defense got gashed. They allowed 27 plus 4 times. That's not what we expected at Pittsburgh. And the success they had last year has a lot to do. We talk about the kickers in this division a lot. Justin Tucker, bye-bye. Chris Boswell is a guy that didn't get nearly as much love as he should have. He hit 13 field goals from 50 plus last year and finished with a franchise record 41. Tomlin takes the points, which is one of the reasons that the Steelers tend to be good underdogs. It's because Tomlin, you know, they'll kick the field goal, and they've got a kicker that can do it. TJ Watt, 11.5 sacks last year. He's looking for a contract right now, but he does return. They bring in Darius Slay at cornerback, DK Metcalf via trade, obviously at wide receiver. That's 2 huge deals. Malik Harrison at linebacker. But, you know, Slay's a pretty big get for them, in my opinion. I like what they did off-season wise. I like what they did in the draft. Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle out of Oregon in the 1st round. Caleb Johnson with the next pick, and Jack Sawyer, the Ohio State edge rusher. I think all 3 of them could have an impact for Pittsburgh this year. When it comes to the upcoming schedule, AFC North teams face AFC East and NFC North teams this year. The 3 extra games for the Steelers, the Chargers, the Colts, and the Seahawks. That's fairly reasonable. And look, they have the Jets, the Pats, the Browns all in the first 5 games. They have Seattle at home. They have Minnie in London. They have very, very winnable start for Pittsburgh. There's a reason to think that the Steelers could get off to a good start under Aaron Rodgers this year, something the Jets were unable to do last year with Rodgers behind center.
Teddy, let everybody know really quickly where they can get your report for the season win totals. You've been doing this for a very long time. This has always been a part of my NFL handicap. So let everybody know what it is, where they can find it, and when it'll be out.
Yeah, the first year was 2001. And I was just kind of screwing around. And I'm like, I was going through the teams. And I'm like, let's go through the win totals and let's just write some up. You know, I'm like, we'll make some bets. And 2001 went really well. And 2002 went really well. And I'm like, this is a thing now. So the record, again, long-term 103-52. I'm proud of that. I work hard for that. Won again last year. Big ticket 17-4 with the 5% big ticket plays. And again, 81% long term. I work hard on this stuff over the summer. You guys see that. So it's been a very profitable report, and the analysis that comes with the report might be the best part because it's stuff you can use all year long in your handicapping. And the interesting thing is the ones that I get wrong, I recognize it usually early. And sometimes you make a lot of money betting on a team I would bet against in the win report or betting against a team that I bet on in the win report because they're teams that we're paying a ton of attention to. So this stuff actually helps all season long. It's not just a report that you buy in July, make your bets, and then forget about. It's usable and it's dynamic because we update it right through the start of the when necessary. We update it right through the start of the first week of the season. So it's not expensive. It's not crazy. It's $1.99. Get you the entire report, but don't buy it. To get on board with any extended service package, an NFL season package, a football combo package, a 90-day all access, whatever extended service package you get, you'll get the report included. So you can buy the report separate if you want. It's not the best deal. I encourage you to visit the page wt.buzz/TC to get on board. And of course, when it comes to this show, guys, we appreciate the likes. Bing, done. Thank you. The comments make all the difference in the YouTube algorithms. And I love the guys. There's a bunch of guys that come in and comment every week. Thank you. And I try to get in and reply to every single comment over the course of the next couple of days. So thank you guys for doing that. We appreciate it very much. And if you haven't done so, what do we have? 200,000 plus that have now subscribed to the WagerTalk YouTube channel. Be one of them. So you get instant alerts every time these videos go live.